So I'm going to read you a Reddit that you might not be aware of to give you a sense of what it's like to work medicine in austere and war-torn regions. This one's called My Shift Lasted 4.5 months, the story of Ukrainian trauma surgeon Yuri Kuznetsov, who was in occupied Izyum, Ukraine, and shares his first-person point of view from April 2022 up until September of this year. This is his story with some minor grammatical changes while I'm reading. I'll give you the link in the comments and you can have a look yourself. I don't have any way of verifying this information, but it certainly sounds real and quite a harrowing experience. It gives me gratitude for where we're at, living in peace and relative abundance. And despite all the hardships that we're all going through, I hope this also gives you a sense of appreciation and gratitude for what we have and what could be if circumstances were different. Some destruction started in the beginning of March. Windows started breaking. Firstly, we tried to send home those who could move on their own, even barely. And after that, we started moving patients who still needed treatment. We moved them from rooms to halls, hiding them behind walls. Every day we moved them lower and lower, from floor 4 to 3 to 2. On March 6th, my shift started. During the night, our city was heavily shelled. The whole hospital was moved to the basement. We moved our patients ourselves. It was very difficult to move those who couldn't walk. We covered people with mattresses, thinking that if we covered them, we could save them from wounds. Our basement, like everywhere, was some place to store things usually. Nobody thought we'd have to live through wartime when the hospital was built. The next morning, nobody from the next shift showed up. I had to stay, and in the end, I had a shift of 4.5 months without any break. Many of the personnel decided to evacuate themselves. I never blamed them. I don't judge. It was my decision, and I knew I must put this burden on myself. We moved everything to the basement and started settling down. We made a kitchen there, a little operating room. We started moving any equipment we could save. In the end, our conditions there were not too bad, but there was so little room. We had 72, 78 people there, including patients. About 4 people had to sit on each bed. With time, more medical people started leaving. On March 10th, only 2 doctors were left, Alexander Yakovlevich and myself. I'm only talking about the doctors. We also had nurses, janitors, orderlies. When Russians entered our part of the city, naturally, we were scared. We had nowhere to hide. We had patients that couldn't move, wounded, people with non-psychiatric diseases, and we had no idea what would happen when we met the occupiers. I told everyone, please, don't argue with them. Don't worry yourselves. Even if you think you're right, don't say anything. They have weapons. Russians came into the hospital and started checking everything. It was March. It was cold. We covered people up with up to 8 blankets. They lifted all those blankets. They were searching for military men, and they told us some things like, forget about your Ukraine. But they let us work. They didn't take anyone. Then they made their own hospital in the neighboring building. Sometime later, me and the second doctor decided to leave for several hours to go check on our families and come back. In the evening, only I came back. The other doctor decided to evacuate. Later, I found his kids were not all right after the shellings. Everyone makes his own decision. I met my family and decided to go back to the hospital, and my son said, Dad, I'm coming with you. I want to help. I told him not to, but he came anyways. He was only 18 then. He saw there everything. Open brains, chest wounds, belly wounds. Let's put it this way. He had a good education, but it was very hard to him. Later, he went away from Izyum with my wife. I was the only doctor left. Most of the nurses had left too. It was hard. We had a lot of wounded. But the most difficult part of it was working without any anesthetists or intensive care doctors. There were young ladies, nurses from anesthesiology and intensive care departments, so we made do. You can't drip cold solutions into bodies, so we had to warm them by pressing them to our bodies. It was March, only 2 to 3 degrees Celsius. Cold spring was unusually long this year. It seems like everything this year was wrong. We had 4 deliveries. Sure, I studied in medical school and studied obstetrics for 1.5, 2 years, but I didn't work with that before. There were 2 young nurses from obstetrics, and I had to recall everything I learned in school. There was a moment when people started taking everything from the shops. Nobody knew what would happen next, so even pharmacies were looted. People who did the looting, they didn't understand if they needed something or not. So people started coming to us asking for something, but we didn't have many things. Then other people started coming, saying, we have this and that in our basement. Do you need it? We started saying, in the morning they are looters, in the evening they are volunteers. I don't blame them. It's just a funny saying. In Russian it rhymes. Several doctors came back in the second half of April, and they came to work from 9 a.m. until 1 p.m., but refused to work later shifts, so I had to work 24/7. Till July 22nd, I worked every night. And usually the wounded would come in the second half of the day, closer to evening. Somehow it happened this way. We lost only 2 patients during this time. We had a lot of people. We counted in August about 400 wounded civilians, but we also had people with other physical disease like heart attacks, pneumonias, bronchitis that didn't disappear because of war. The hardest thing is when you cannot help, when people are wounded in the head because of shelling or mines. In May or June, my friend came to the hospital with his wife in his hands. I knew them both very well, but she had a direct hit to the heart and there was nothing I could do. It is very hard when you know someone personally. Everyone who was there, everyone had moments of depression. Everyone had personal tragedy. We supported each other and helped, and it also helped to see the lives you saved when people said, thank you for being here. One day my neighbors came running, your home was destroyed. I went to check, and when I saw, I started laughing. The shell hit directly in my kitchen, and they said it was 7 p.m. when it happened. Usually when I'm home, that's the time that I'm in the kitchen. So work saved my life again. We can build things anew, but life can never come back. We saw everything happening around the Russian military hospital from our windows, how they brought the wounded in, cars moving. On September 10th, I went out to see no checkpoints, no guard, and everything was quiet. I said to my colleague, let's go check everything. I don't understand what's going on. We went and saw things scattered everywhere, stretchers. All the doors were open, nobody there. All day, September 10th, and all night was quiet, like a vacuum, divine silence. The next day, our guys entered the city. Our guys came back, and immediately we became calm. But several months before that, we lived under hellish pressure. Only now I understand. I can breathe.